Good man, my love. Because I just wanted to. I was going to say quick tips. I'm going to make it as quick as possible, but I wanted to give a few tips for um, lyricists, songwriters who want to transition, who are non-native English speakers, when I transition from writing material in their native language in English. There's a couple of barriers I often notice that non-native English speakers who are creative writers um, often don't think about. So let me start off with you've probably heard the phrase, just because you're fluent in a language, it doesn't necessarily mean you can teach that language. Or just because a language is your native tongue, just doesn't mean that you're going to be good at teaching it. A similar rule applies, I would say, when it comes to songwriting in a language that is not your native language, or, yeah, that is not your native language directly, yeah. Because speaking a language fluently, that's not your native language, and maybe even writing in that language for the purpose of communication, sending emails, and if you're a student or whatever, um, is can be different from writing in that language from a creative perspective. Um, so one thing that people conflate often is this concept of English being very easy to learn for the purposes of communication, and English being easy to learn for the purposes of expression. That might seem like semantics, but it's not when you break it down. It's when you break it down, what I'm saying is, for the purpose of basic communication, English is easy to learn. You don't even need to have the grammar polished. For example, if you're making a report on a police report, a crime on a crime, or just a report on something that you've seen, an event that you've seen, if your grammar is not up to scratch, it's not that important. Or even if your vocabulary is limited, it's not that important in terms of getting the raw information. Yeah, like for example, I don't know. You're saying somebody says something like, "May not know what to do." You know the person means I don't know what to do instantly. As a person who's either a native speaker or just fluent in the language, you automatically know what the person is saying, and that basically comes from the fact that, or one of the reasons why this is, at least, comes from the fact that English is an amalgamation of so many languages that even when you mess up the construction, it's still relatable. It's still relatable, and you can still more or less catch the meaning. Like, you really have to fuck up the sentence construction for it to be completely unrecognizable what the person's trying to say when it comes to English, right? But then when you start talking about creative writing in English, creative, you're going into a whole another thing, because English can have oftentimes can have words, a myriad of words to describe the same thing, or a similar thing, and those different words that describe the same situation can have their own little nuances, and that's when it becomes a bit more complex, right? So the first thing, you want to transition into writing into English, brush up on your vocabulary, and that would be the same for me. For example, if I wanted to write in Bosnian, Croatian, or Serbian, like currently, there's no way I could do that. Like, I'll sound like an 8-year-old. Do you know what I mean? Just because I can communicate in it. So I'm not. It's not natural to me. It's still not at that point where it feels natural to me, and that's honestly through a lack of practice. So I know that for myself. So I would definitely not attempt to even though I can write in Bosnian for the sake of communicating with people, text or whatever. Cool. I wouldn't write a song in Bosnia. That would be crazy at this point. Like, maybe at some point I could do that, but not now. So, first thing is brush up on your vocabulary game. And the second thing I notice, especially with rappers, I would say, I notice this tendency to throw a bunch of slang in there. And look, of course, cool. You like certain words, use certain words, but make it feel natural. Do you know what I mean? You got to think of, does it feel natural? Do you use a lot of slang in your own language? Maybe you do. Okay, cool. Then just make sure that you're checking the context and you're aware of the context of the slang words that you use. So you're using them in contextually correct ways, right? Or ways that can contextually make sense. This is a better way of putting that. But on the flip side of that, I would say, don't be afraid if your style of writing in English is different to how it is in your native language. That's also not a problem. It's a scientific fact that when you learn to think in another language, it gives you a different perspective on the world and how you analyze things. Because the language itself, the mechanics of the language, have varying ways in which they describe things. To give an example, to use the one that obviously is going to come straight to my mind, in Bosnian, if you're saying you're hanging out with your friend, the way that you construct a sentence and then with the pardish on top, you know whether that friend is male or female straight away. Obviously in English, if I just say I'm hanging out with my friend, you don't know if I'm hanging out with a male or female, right? So that's one way where the languages differ. So I would say there's in a lot of ways, Bosnian can be more direct in giving you the information that you may need or want from a sentence. Yeah. So that's one thing. Don't be afraid for your style to differ. If it differs, that's fine. That's just the way that you're processing how you think when you're using that other language, or in this case, obviously English. I'll say this for non-native English speakers who are black. If you're gonna use the N word, ask yourself, why? Do you use it in your regular speech when you're speaking your native language, or is there an equivalent of nigger in your native language that you use? If yes, okay, yeah. If there is an equivalent of the word N-word in your native language and you don't use it, or there just simply isn't an equivalent, and you don't choose to use nigger in your regular speech just anyway because of an American influence or whatever, why then, for these particular two non-native English speakers, particularly rappers, I'm getting at here, who then transition to writing in English and you're saying nigger and everything, like, what's the reason for that? Ask yourself. I'm not the linguistic or language police or whatever. I'm just saying it's something you should question. If you don't do it in your own language, what is the reason you choose to do it when you start writing in English? I'm always, if nothing else, fascinated by that, because it's, for example, I can say for myself that I've said this in the previous video. I've only ever used it in my music when I'm making a social point about it. I never heard another black person call another black person in the UK a nigger until I was 18. European black people in Europe for sure, if we're being honest. And I would say this black people who are not from America in general. Yeah. If we're being honest, our usage of that is based on American influence. If we're really being honest about it. It's also really weird when I hear like African and Caribbean artists use this. Like, very weird for me. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. Question it. Really question. That's what I'm questioning. What I can compare it to for me on a more basic level is there was a time with the UK MCs where there was a lot of UK MCs at a certain point started rapping in American accents. Yeah, and they, as they got older, transitioned out of that, and that's again an American influence. Yeah, America is obviously the birthplace of hip hop. Yeah, so there's logic behind what happens, but as people got older, they realize, okay, they found their own voice, they came into their own accent. Like, I personally actually never did an American accent, and I used to say to myself, oh, it's because I was really, I really knew myself and blah blah blah. But really, when I think about it now, that's bullshit. Well, I realized what it was that okay, so I was born in London, but then I went to school in Ireland for 5 years, and I developed an Irish accent, or it was an Irish accent, but it had like an American twang. I would say an Irish accent with an American twang. And that was based on the fact of, I guess, mixing with my English accent, and also the school I went to had people from all over the world. So I guess I got influenced by all the different accents I was hearing, and so I had like this Irish accent with this like mixture of accents that ended up sounding like some kind of generic American accent. And I remember when I came back to school in London, so I did my last year of primary school in London, and then did my high school in London, and over the process of 3 years, I lost the Irish accent. And I remember when I could feel it going away, I could notice it going away, I felt kind of sad, to be honest with you. And I think, like, on some subconscious level, I realized that your voice is a big way of how you represent yourself. It's a way of how you present yourself to the world. Your voice, people hear your voice, they notice your voice, you know what I mean? And your accent ties into that, obviously. So I'm going on a tangent here, but basically, how your voice, when you're transitioning into English, that's what I was going with this. So when you're transitioning into like recording in English, so you've written your lyrics, now you're recording in English. So I'm aware that a lot of particularly Europeans who English isn't a native language for speak English with an American twang. Again, understandable. That's an American influence. America is very historically dominant in the media, music, and everything. So, okay, cool, I get that. However, not all. So, if you don't naturally speak English with an American twang, again, especially for rappers, singing is a bit different because you kind of, when you're bending the vocals and that, you can't. There's more of a natural. There's more of a tendency to kind of stray away from your accent anyway, because you're focusing more on the tones rather than the actual accent, I guess. So that makes sense. But where rap is more centered to spoken word, if you start rapping in English with an American twang, but you don't speak English with an American twang, question. Just question it. If you want to continue doing that, cool, but just question it. Is that natural to you? Are you putting that on? And then, listen, you can, if you want to put on a voice, put on a voice, but be aware of why you're putting on that voice. That's the thing. Be aware of why you're putting on that voice. Because like I'm saying, your voice is a representation of yourself. Yeah, especially when you're talking from an artistic standpoint of recording vocals. Yeah. So, in short, to go back to the UK example, that's why a lot of, well, almost all at least, British rappers transition into their own accent in the end because they realize, okay, I'm telling my story, so I'm going to use my voice. You know what I mean? Of course, if you're doing a character that's part of your persona as an artist, that's a whole different thing. But then also be careful with that you're not doing a parody that is culturally offensive. Let's put it that way. So be aware of that. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there, man. So just a bit of a brainstorm. Yeah, if there's any helpful information in there, run with that. Have a blessed evening. Vidum, sir. Ciao.